I can see for the attendees, we only have 5 so far. So we kindly request that you're patient with us as we try and reach out and get more colleagues to join in. Thank you so much. Participants. So kindly requesting, let's give them another 3 minutes before we start. 15 minutes past the hour. And I think what I can hear Geoffrey saying, there are some people also where in the room he's seated from Mozambique. So we appreciate that. And even as we start, I think Precious, you will also try and reach out to the colleagues in Zambia. So colleagues, just thanking you again for joining the meeting. We really appreciate that you have created time to come and join us today. And I think yesterday was quite a heavy day, but I think we were able to learn about a lot about the IPC strategy for Afro, what has been done so far, why, you know, the business for IPC, why we need to strengthen our IPC program. We went into the core components of IPC and the IPC minimum requirement, as well as the assessment tool. So I think the presentation was quite interesting and really emphasizing what Prof. Babaka said. We need to start step by step and build right from the foundation going up. We cannot do many things at one time. Just the way we are saying, we don't paint a house before we build the foundation. Same thing, we need to first ensure that the structures, the systems are in place, and that way we will have, you know, sustainable programs. So indeed, it was quite a fruitful presentation. Today, we also have a number of presentations, but definitely not as heavy as yesterday's. So without further ado, we'll just go into the housekeeping rules. Next slide, please. And just to remind you that you always select the join audio by computer so that you can be able to listen in. Okay, this will automatically let you in, and you can be able to listen to the presentation. Next slide. Again, on my extreme left, you can see the mute and mute button where you can click if you want to talk. Please feel free to talk, and Echo, you can support us in ensuring that all participants can be able to unmute whenever they are called upon. Then there's a video which you can click on and off. As well as this screen sharing, which is the arrow, the box with an arrow colored green. And then the chat area, please type in any questions or concerns. And on the extreme right is if you want to leave the meeting, then you can click that. Next slide. So in case you have 2 people named, you know, if that is not your name, kindly ensure that you have renamed. We really want to know who you are, and in the chat box you can write what department you are in, what do you support really. Next slide. And just also to inform you that when you want to talk, please introduce yourself and mute the button, and then tell us which organization and location, and mute yourself. And then also we request that you switch off your phone or put it on silent during the session. And if you have any question, raise your hand from the button, the button you can see below, or send in the chat box and wait for the facilitator to open the session for any questions. So again, we need to inform you that Project ECHO may collect registration, participation, question and answer, chats and comments, and poll responses for the program. And this will be shared with the Nepal Medical Association and WHO Nepal, but your individual data will be de-identified and kept confidential. Next slide. And for interpretation, you can see below there is an area for interpretation for the Portuguese speaking colleagues. So Without further ado, I think we can go ahead and begin our presentation. So the first presentation will be made by Ms. Tendai Makamure, who's the IPC focal point for Eastern Southern African region, and she will take us through the strategic planning. Tendai.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deborah. Good morning, colleagues. Let me try to share my screen and let me know if you can see it. Okay. No, it's the wrong thing. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
You can see it?
Yes, maybe you just move to the first slide and then slideshow.
Thank you so much. So colleagues, today my presentation is on the strategic plan, and this is the most important document for our activity for developing the National Action Plan. And this is the step that comes after the situational analysis and is closely linked, it's sequential. So once we are done with the situational analysis, we are now moving on to the strategic plan. And as we can remember from yesterday, we have now done our detailed analysis and assessment of the IPC program using the IPCAT minimum requirement tool and also doing the SWOT analysis. Now from all the results of the analysis situation, we are now moving next to the strategic plan, and we come up with a vision for our IPC programs with the goals and with the key strategic interventions. So this is to show you the stage at which the strategic plan is coming following the situation analysis that I've just mentioned. Now we are starting on the strategic plan, and we are saying, how do we come up with this strategic plan? So our strategic plan is it is the roadmap which is going to give us guidance on how we are going to address all the gaps identified in the situational analysis, and we are going to define the strategic interventions, and we are going to identify the key activities that will be necessary to undertake for us to address those gaps and achieve our strategic interventions, and ensure that we, at the end of 5 years, we put our minimum requirements in place. And as we identify these activities, we also come up with risk analysis. We analyze the risks that can pose threats to our activities and come up with mitigation plans. So at the end of this exercise, we are hoping that we can translate the WHO recommendations on minimum requirements, which are the IPC program, the guidelines, the training and education, the high surveillance, and the monitoring and audit into national strategic plans for the next 5 years. So it's important to note that our strategic plan will be for 5 years, and we will identify the key steps for each of the strategic interventions that we are going to be carrying out and analyzing the risks for each. So this is again a summary of the process where we are coming from the analysis of the situation. Then when you come to the National Action Plan, we are looking at the strategic objectives, the priority interventions, and the activities. And when we move to the operational plan, these main activities will be broken down into sub-activities with defined indicators, and we'll move to budget and resource allocation plan. So these are some of the key considerations for our strategic plan. It should be inspired by the national vision for our IPC program on the implementation of the activities that we want to undertake, and it should be aligned with the components of with some of our national policies as well, and also the components which are recommended by WHO. So there should also be clarity of our key strategic interventions that the country will implement over a given period of time with clearly defined timelines as well. And these key strategic interventions, they need to be clear and achievable objectives, and they should be aligned with the gaps to be managed, and most importantly, based on the availability of capacity in the country, human resources, financial resources, and also identifying the key priorities. So our strategic plan should aim to address all the gaps that we would have identified in the situational analysis, and to make sure that we start improving them, because it's only the improvement of those gaps that will ensure that at the end of 5 years, we are able to put the minimum requirements in place at national level and build a sustainable program. And also there should be consideration of the challenges and barriers to be identified, as well as the mitigation measures. So we just don't identify the gaps, we also come up with the mitigation challenges. So the overall goal for the development of the strategic plan, as I have mentioned, is to ensure that we put the minimum requirements in place at national level within 5 years. So the process is a step-by-step approach where we are starting by ensuring we put in place at the national level. And once we have this at national level, I'm sure it will be able to translate them to facility level, as they will have a strong program at the national level that can coordinate all the activities at the subnational level. And the specific objectives should be based on the situational analysis, and most precisely on all the gaps that we would have identified. So this is a template of the strategic plan that we are going to come up with, and that we are going to be using to develop the strategic plan. So as you can see, I'll give an example here. Let's say when we assessed the IPC program, remember yesterday from the IPCAT minimum requirement tool, there were 5 questions on IPC programs. There were 4 or 5 questions on IPC programs assessing the first component on the minimum requirement. And we identified that there are gaps there within that component. The strategic objective here will be to establish a national IPC program with support from legal services. I think, as you remember, as we were starting the process and we were engaging with the national team on planning this workshop, we emphasized on the need to have representation from the legal services and from financial services. Because on the component 1 on IPC programs, there are key issues to do with the legal services, and also we were talking about a dedicated budget for IPC, and hence the importance of having these people to be part of, these key stakeholders to be part of this workshop. So for these strategic objectives, they've been identified 3 interventions to address the gaps within the IPC program. And the first one is designating a working group to develop regulatory drafts. And the recommended examples are the order in which is followed legally in creating a national IPC program, and the order on the organization and operation of the national IPC program. So this is the first strategic intervention. And the second one for this one, because the first one we have designated a group to develop regulatory draft. The second one is to organize a national workshop which will be responsible for validating the text. And then the third intervention will be an official signature of the text by the national authority. It could be the Ministry of Health. So in all of these strategic interventions, we have addressed the gap in the component on IPC program, and we have now been able to have established an IPC program with the relevant legal backing that will support the implementation and the overview of the whole program. So these strategic interventions will be broken down in the next column in the main steps, where we are now looking at the main steps for each of these interventions. And these include the first one, we are saying we are designating a working group. So the main step there, after we've designated a working group, we need to elaborate the terms of reference of this working group, which will be in charge of the elaboration of the drafts. And then they will be assigned with the task designation of the working group, and then they develop the regulatory drafts. Then we organize the workshop here as the second strategic intervention to validate this text. Remember, in the one of the main steps, they've developed a draft. Then on the main steps, they're now elaborating the concept note for the workshop. We need a concept note for the workshop before it's done, to explain what will be happening in the workshop and the expected outcomes and the different methods to be used in that workshop as part of the concept note. Following which you hold the workshop to validate the developed workshop. And following which we are going to identify risks for each of these strategic interventions and steps. And one of these could be lack of financial resources. And an example, the last column, which is in French, is talking about the mitigation of the risks. And one of the ways to mitigate these risks could be that the activity can be budgeted, should be budgeted as part of the implementation operational plan. And if there's no budgeted, the national committed budgets within the Ministry of Health. We also encourage the activity of partner mapping. So we involve our partners in these key activities. I think that's the other big advantage of having a strategic plan. It will enable all the multiple partners who are supporting IPC activities to align to the activities which are in the strategic plan and ensure that in the 5 years, we make substantial improvement in our IPC programs at the national level. So this is just to give a few characteristics of the strategic plan. And for the strategic plan, as I have mentioned, it's long-term focused. And it focuses on giving the strategic direction for the infection prevention program. And it's a 5-year document, which is unlikely to change during its time. This will just help to differentiate between a strategic plan and the operational plan, which is coming in the next presentation. This was a very short presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tendai, for that elaborate presentation on the strategic plan. And I believe, colleagues, we are now, building momentum and now trying to understand how to move about developing our national action plan. So without further ado, I will call upon Prof. Babaka to continue with the operational planning presentation. Prof.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Good morning, everybody. Let me try to share my presentation, operational planning. Can you see the presentation? I think
yes. Yes, we
yes.
can. Yes, yes.
Is it slide mode?
No, it's not slide mode, Prof. Yeah, now it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can, Prof.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tendai talked about the strategic plan. What is the strategic plan? To summarize, the strategic plan is what you want to do, what you have to do on the next coming years. after your situational analysis. The strategic plan is comprised of all strategic intervention you have to put in place in around 5 years, but it's very flexible. How about the operational planning? The operational planning is what you have to do in the short term, in the year, in 1 year. So the operational plan comes just after the strategic planning. After situational analysis, strategic planning, you have to develop an operational plan for 1 year. And the difference is not only on timing, but the operational plan should have details of all activities. For each intervention, you have to develop a work plan with deadline, responsible entities, indicators, and required resources. You should have all these details in order to develop easily your operational plan. So now you understand the difference between strategic planning and operational planning. After your operational planning, you can budgetize. After, you can plan for the monitoring and evaluation, how you are going to monitor the activities on the years. Obviously, it is very easily we can understand that, as I say every time, you are building your building, and you will, for the indicators, you will be based on basic indicators. And the basic indicators at the beginning will be structure indicators and just some process indicators. I think you understand now that it's a chain. It's a chain with different links. Analysis of situation is one link, strategic planning is one link, operational planning is one link, budgeting one link, monitoring one link. And the strength of the chain will depend on the strength of each link. You don't have to have one weak link. All the links should be very strong. You know now very well this slide with the first state of situational analysis. The development of the core component of the action plan. Operational plan comes just after the strategic plan. But you have also after the link of budgeting, resource allocation. Resource allocation is more wide than budgeting and the monitoring. Now, we are going to focus on the operational planning. As I said, it's very detailed. And because for each activities identified in the strategy, you should specify the indicators. And for the indicators, you have to put the baseline indicators. The baseline indicators is the current situation of the country. From this baseline, you have to target. What would you like to go from your baseline? It's a target indicator. The institution responsibility, the entity which is responsible for the intervention or the activity. It will be mainly IPC, but in collaboration with other institutions in the country. You have to put the deadline because it's an annual operational plan. You have to know when are you going to achieve all your intervention, and you have to finish during the year. What resources I need human resources, infrastructure, operational resources, funding, and the source of funding. And some complex activities will need to be classified into sub-activities. And if you have sub-activities, you have to go through details of all sub-activities in order to be able to have a very sincere budget. Objective of this session is you will gain knowledge of the alignment between operational activities and strategic intervention defined in your strategic plan, because your operational plans, once again, should be derived on the strategic plan. You should be able to implement a priority setting process for short term, because the operational plan should comprise the priority activities on the short term. You cannot realize, you cannot achieve your strategic plan in 5 years. Every year you have to prioritize, every year. But IPC is it's a changing world. So the reality of 2022 maybe will not be the reality of 2023. So you have to prioritize each year according to the current reality and your current problems also. You should have knowledge to assess the resources need. And obviously, in the context of limited resources, we've had national budgeting. You have to identify what sources can you find for the funding of your activities. Some consideration about operational plan. What intervention should be implemented to support strategic intervention? What are the activities associated with the strategic intervention? And for all this, ensure they meet the SMART characteristic. Your strategic intervention, your activities should be SMART. The meaning is the activity is specific, or the intervention, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So you can know if your target indicator is met, yes or no. So for the operational planning, you have to answer all these questions. For all activity, you should know why, where, how, when, by whom. It is the reason why the operational plan should have all the details need. Very big characteristic of the operational plan is the priority setting process. You have to make a choice among your strategic intervention in your strategic plan. You have to identify the strengths, start building on the strength. You have to start building now what you will need later, what is most important for later. In the current context of African countries, we have some priority now. and to be classified as important weaknesses. I give you some example, the need of human resources with capacity to lead the implementation of the project. I think we talked yesterday about all these priorities, human resources, the need for sustainable protection of staff against the risk of infection. Also, the preparedness to epidemics. And then some core component should be prioritized, like 1, 2, 3. But in the context of putting in place minimum requirement, you don't have to do all. For instance, you need to put in place the role and responsibility. It is important to have the role and responsibility to run the program, because without that, you cannot continue, you cannot achieve anything. So this component, you have to prioritize it. No need to have a tool for prioritization. So the important problem of progressive step-by-step implementation. When you visit Paris, you can be sure that this town wasn't built in one day because of this complexity. We have a tool for prioritization. This tool is on this matrix, and you can see here for each activities or strategic intervention, if you have to prioritize between two, you have to balance between the importance of the activities and, in the other hand, the feasibility, the availability of resources, the effectiveness, the alignment with connects program, etc. So if you put the balance between two activities, if one is in your right and above here, giving quick result in green, in this space, you will have the more priorities, the big priorities. If the activities is very important, but very, very difficult to achieve, you can consider it's a hard work. It's a very important project. Maybe it will not be, we will not start with. If the activities is less important, but very easy, but not easy also, so you can give up or postpone. If the activity is less important, but very easy to be achieved, you can put it here. So in the green zone, you can see some activities like hand hygiene. It is the reason why hand hygiene will be a priority process for IPC program. The other consideration is to prioritize the target, the first target of the mountain, which is minimum requirement. You have seen many times this slide requesting to put in place minimum requirement at national level and at facility level in your country. The minimum requirement are the norm or the standard that should be in place everywhere to ensure protection and safety for patients, health workers, and visitors. It should be the first target. We have the special case of component 1. For this component 1, there is a need. It's a priority, obviously, because this component allow to put in place your program formally in order to get budget, to get leadership, etc., etc., but especially to put in place role and responsibility for the beginning of the work, and will also allow sustainability. So the component 1 allow to have leadership, to put in place in a very early stage role and responsibilities, and to allow also sustainability of resources, because you can get budget if you have a formal institution. Over consideration. After component 1, most important things to be prioritized are 2 and 3. You have to have, if you don't have guideline, you have to, the guideline allow to give direction. And component 3 is training. People should be capacitated to do the work. So it is necessary to put in place this component to ensure the availability at the country level of qualified human resources and in sufficient number. Without human resources, you cannot do anything. Without qualified human resources. So you have to qualify your staff. And for other activities, you have to prioritize. You have to prioritize the long-term protection of health personnel against the risk of occupational infection. And this pandemic is an opportunity to start with SARS-CoV-2. Sorry, sometimes I use French term because of the habit. But the protection against SARS-CoV-2 should be just an entry point for a long-term protection of the staff against all occupational infection. You have also to prioritize something last, the establishment of favorable care environment for good practice of hand hygiene at operational level. So in this slide, you can understand that it is very important to capacitate the staff, to protect the staff, and to put them on a favorable care environment. It is necessary for the beginning of your program to have all these factors, or these enabling factors. Other important consideration is to use the 5 steps for all activities. Yesterday, I have talked very widely about the step 1 preparation. We are doing now the preparation of your action plan. Next, very next, in your face-to-face workshop, you are going to proceed to the baseline assessment using IPCAP minimum requirement. We are going to develop an action plan. And after that, you will have to execute your plan. And before the end of the year, you will go to the step 4, evaluating the impact of your action plan. And after this evaluation, you have to sustain the program. It's a cycle every year. Every year, you have to improve more and more. And obviously, the contents of your action plan will change over the years, because the first years you cannot have data from surveillance. It's not possible. Develop first the capacity in order to have reliable data. You cannot have good data if the capacity are not in place. Ultimate goal for all countries is to have full requirement, obviously, but start with minimum requirement first. Instead, trying to get not reliable data, try to put in place minimum requirement. So it is a template for operational planning, and you can see very detailed information to put in place for each intervention priority. In your operational plan, you have only intervention priorities of the year. The intervention, for each intervention, you have activities. Sometimes some activities have sub-activities, and for each of them, put the responsibility, the turnaround time, the indicators, basic and target. Put the resources required for the activities, also activities. What human resource, infrastructure, operational, and source of funding if necessary. So the first operational plan, it's just only the first of many of them. Your program should be a suite of many operational plan every year. This operational plan will be supported by regular evaluation with the goal of establishing effective IPC program. Thank you very much for your attention. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that elaborate presentation. I really like the fact that you've been able to differentiate the strategic and the operational plan, seeing that the strategic plan is what needs to be done in 5 years, while the operational is priorities of the year. So it's the priority activities for the year. So let us keep that in mind, even when we embark on that, the development of the national action plan. And also talking about the importance of really laying down the foundation, the capacity, building the capacity before we refine the other areas of IPC. So thank you so much. I don't know. We need to have first questions from colleagues. So I don't know. We will call colleagues from, we can start with Mozambique. Mozambique colleagues. Geoffrey, any questions?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Babagar. Thank you, Tendai, and thank you, Dr. Deborah. For now, no, I don't have a specific question now. Thank you. I don't know if Dr. Felizarda and the other colleagues from Mozambique, if they have anything to add now at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, Felizada, any questions? We need to hear your voice. So we know that we are at par and we are all progressing with the presentation. So colleagues from Mozambique, Felizada, any questions? Or anyone else? Thank you, thank you. There is a hand. Jessica, please go ahead. Okay, we need to give Jessica. Jessica, you can now unmute.
Thank you so much for allowing us to bring up questions so far. Personally, I don't have any question. One of my main concerns was that I could not, my chat box was disabled, but so far I don't have any questions. And if I do have, I will present them in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So feel free to ask any questions. Anyone else? The team from Zambia.
Good morning, Deborah, and good morning, everyone on the call. I think at the moment there are no questions. I cannot see any hands, but maybe from my side, it's a question that is more of operational. I know that Afro is going to support us in the development of these strategic plans. I'm just wondering if there are any plans to support countries in resource mobilization, especially on the core components of education and training, because the curriculum is being developed, but for us to advocate for this curriculum to be included in the training institutions, we might need that support. So I'm just asking if HQ and Afro have got any plans to support our countries with resource mobilization, at least to attend to one or two core components of the IPC strengthening program. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Precious, for that. And indeed, we have an answer, and I would want also Prof. Babaka to also highlight. But for the priority activities, you'll see as we progress, Prof will be talking about the priorities, activities, the 4 wheels of the cart, of which WHO is willing to support. So strengthening IPC programs, guidelines, the training, and also the health worker protection. So Prof will talk elaborately, and those are areas that we will take up. In addition to that, you will see that one of the activities, the resource mobilization, Prof will also present on that. And we also have a toolkit by Resolve to Save Lives to support in resource mobilization. So that would be one of the areas which we will be capacity building on and seeing how to support in the same. But let me leave Prof. Babaka to talk exhaustively, Prof.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I think you answered the question about resource mobilization, because Resolve developed a strategy for resource mobilization. We can use this strategy, but this strategy should be used at the right time in countries, because you cannot have a budget, official budget of the state if there is no institution. So we'll do it ever with Resolve, ever with WHO, to develop activities for resource mobilization at the right time. And I will go present. I'm going to make a presentation about resource allocation, because resource allocation is not only state budget. There are many things to do about the resource mobilization. I will do a presentation. Regarding the problem of human resources and training, as I said in the presentation, it's a priority. It's a priority for countries, priority for Afro WHO, priorities for HQ, because as you may know, we have now a global IPC strategy. In the framework of the global IPC strategy, HQ is developing a technical working group for training. And in the framework of regional strategy, WHO Afro is working on the development of curriculum for training. So we are going to support on training, it is sure. I cannot go through details, but because it will depend of the countries, we cannot go through all countries, but we will prioritize, and some countries will benefit from direct training from IPC team, Afro team, but all countries will have guidelines for training, curriculum for training. And we will soon be able to publish the curriculum for training. Is what I can say in this stage. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Prof. So, Felizada, you can now unmute.
Bom dia, obrigada.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I was not able to unmute, but we listened attentively to the presentation. Now I demonstration to raise. Therefore, I think we can carry on with the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Felizada. Any other questions or concerns regarding strategic and operational plan?
Sorry, Deborah, I didn't get the question in Portuguese.
She was, I think she was saying that the progress is okay, or maybe we can leave for Maria Clara to tell us. Yes. Maria Clara, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning everybody. Felizardo has not any question for now. I understand that she's okay with the presentation so far. So I don't know if you have a specific question for me as well. Sorry.
Okay, so colleagues from Mozambique, we have Maria Clara with us, and she's able to take any questions in Portuguese. So feel free to raise your hands, please.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, and you can unmute. Precious, is that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand. Deborah, I'm just requesting if the chat box can be enabled for the participants to post some of their concerns. I'm told the chat box is disabled.
Okay, thank you, Precious, for that. And ECHO colleagues, please take note. Okay. So without further ado, I think we can go to the next presentation. So this is a very brief presentation. I hope you can see my slides. And I think today, okay. So yesterday we talked about situational analysis by Prof. Babaka, a very elaborate presentation indeed. And today we've talked about strategic planning and operational planning, highlighting that the strategic plan is what needs to be done in 5 years, and the operational is the priorities of the year, the activities, which can also include sub-activities for the year. Then now we move to the planning for monitoring and evaluation. So this will include the deadlines, the process, especially the performance indicators, methods of data collection and reporting, as well as analysis and sharing information. So to develop the core components of the action plan, as you can see, monitoring and evaluation comes last, but we will definitely have time to talk about resource allocation today. So monitoring and evaluation are two distinct but complementary and related concepts, where monitoring is a planned systematic process of observation that closely follows a course of activity and compares what is happening with what is expected to happen. So for instance, training, we could have a monitoring for that based on the core components of the IPC or the interventions that have been highlighted. And evaluation is a process that evaluates an achievement of an activity against predefined criteria. Methodologies and targets vary. So you could use an observation questionnaire. You could also evaluate the process and the performance. While an indicator is an evaluation and decision-making tool that measures a trend or a situation in a relatively objective way in space and time. So there are two indicators, descriptive indicators or the processes, as Prof has said earlier on while we are starting, the process indicators are really critical, but the performance indicators, which are the rates, are never leaves indifferent the decision maker. So these performance indicators are really critical for us to also incorporate. What are the roles and interests of M&D? When we have effective M&D, it really is important in terms of development and implementation of planned activities. You can monitor and see how far we are, and we're able to detect and identify obstacles as we monitor the progress. And there are a minimum set of indicators which are proposed by WHO, of which we will share with you based on the priority activities, and we can utilize this. And each country should select and include indicators in its national M&D plan to ensure consistency with the regional plan. So we have the global strategy that is coming up. We have the regional plan. We are aligning it with the WHO IPC minimum requirements to ensure also that even these indicators are aligned to that and also based on priority activities. So for important definitions, the process is the activities that are carried out to achieve the objective. Those would include maybe training of the health workers or creating awareness or support supervision, among others. While the input are the resources that are used. This could be the human resources, the IPC capacities, the materials used, maybe the wash infrastructure, the training materials, etc. And financial, definitely we cannot miss on financial resources that are really critical. For the output, these are program level results, direct deliverables, such as number of health workers trained, number of education materials distributed, among other interventions delivered. The effects, they are short-term outcomes, and this would include maybe the knowledge, attitude, and practice following training of health workers, the behavioral changes such as hand hygiene, development of a policy, okay, those would be short-term outcomes. Well, the impact, these are the long-term outcomes at the population level. So morbidity, which is the transmission rate and incident rate would be a long-term outcome. So it is important to consider, what is important to consider is we need to agree on the frequency of M&D of the progress. So an evaluation of the implementation can be done every six months or annually by the IPC committee to see the progress. And whenever possible, it's important that we use standard tools and available information systems. So we had shared with you earlier on the core components and the assessment tools that can be used, and also other tools by WHO. And also for available information system, definitely Precious, you had raised the issue of a national health information system. So we need to, as much as possible, use platforms that are sustainable so that we don't have fragmented or parallel programs. So it is recommended to select a limited number of priority activities, as Prof has clearly said, and then we can monitor the implementation, and this can occur even on a dashboard. So this is like the M&D template, and you can see interventions is the first one. So we can take an example of an intervention is advanced IPC training, and the inputs, which are the basic resources. We will need, people who have capacity in IPC. So this could be local IPC focal points who are trained, or you can have international IPC focal points. As Prof has said, WHO, we also have training materials for basic and advanced IPC training. So those could be resources that can be used. And the activities or the process in this case would be the preparatory activities for the training and the implementation, which is the training that will take place. For the deliverables, or the outputs, we can say the IPC team, which has, or the health workers who have enhanced skills in running IPC program, or who have been trained on IPC, and the results definitely at program level will be that the program will be strengthened. If now we have our IPC focal points, all of them having received advanced training from national to facility level. At population level, we can talk about the morbidity or disease transmission, maybe nosocomial infections, and definitely the impact long-term would be the same. So for the timelines, you may want to do that maybe in the first quarter, and the target indicator would be maybe the in-service the number of health workers who have been trained in IPC or who have received advanced training of IPC. So this would be done for the priority activities and of using the M&D plan. And it is critical that we remember that a feedback component is important, and sharing of results with all stakeholders, including the health workers in the various facilities, so that they know what the impact has been. So that is it from me, and thank you very much. So that was a brief presentation on monitoring and evaluation. And so we'll move to the next presentation by Prof. Babaka on gaps identification and management, as well as resource allocation. Prof.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Let me share my presentation. Gap identification first. You can see my presentation, I suppose.
Yes, we can, Prof.
Slide mode.
Yes, on slide mode.
Thank you very much. Identification and management of gap in IPC program should be. Sorry. Sorry.
Prof, you can progress. I think someone had unmuted. We have muted.
Okay, we are going to talk about the identification and management of gap. As you may know, the gap are numerous in African region. The gap are multiple, and sometimes the gap are very deep, very huge gap on IPC. So one of the most frequent aspect of your work, of your duty during the next coming month and years will be to identify and to manage the gap. So it is very important to understand how to proceed. The outline, after the introduction on the description of the problem, I will talk about the process of situational analysis, because it's the first step where you have to identify and manage the gap. After that, we will go to prioritization, because after identifying all the gap, you have to prioritize, as we said. And finally, to finish, I will give you a concrete example of gap, and we will manage to give this concrete example of gap, so you can understand more with a concrete example. The problem of African region, as you may know, is despite the emergence and re-emergence of communicable diseases, we are always far from international standard of IPC. IPC is very weak in our countries. And the countries are deprived of this effective means of combating epidemics, of combating AMR, etc. In this table, you can see some figures showing the multitude of the gap in African countries. Some example. In 62.5% of countries, the IPC practices are suboptimal.
The different methods of pouring water or use of water, whatever. But I think that picture is trying to just saying.
Sorry, what is happening, Deborah?
I think sometimes if you go into all those methods of how using a deep tap.
Sorry, Mr. Emmanuel, may you please mute? Prof, you may proceed. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you. In 75% of countries, we have inadequate PPE. In all countries, there is a lack of healthcare workers surveillance. So if you have a look in this table, you can see the situation in Africa is really problematic in terms of IPC. We have been talking about all these negative factors in Africa. Some reference about the figures, but WHO and partners are doing many things in this context, in this problematic context. With the weak IPC, numerous epidemics and pandemics in the recent years, many efforts has been done to improve the situation. In particular, WHO developed many technical recommendations and tools for implementation. You know about core component, you know about minimum requirement and hygiene, assessment tool, etc., etc. There are many things. And in this situation, it is high time that more coherent and concrete initiative be taken at country level in the form of national program with appropriate resources with the objective of implementing the recommendation on health security. It is high time to act. Now you understand the situation. Now let's go to the situational analysis and identification and management of gap. I'm not going to go widely again on this process of situational analysis, but you should know it is always necessary to start with, to have an initial assessment, also named baseline assessment, but also assessment for impact research, because you have to know if your action plan has been effective. You need for a correct identification of all the gap. You know why? The reason is, if a gap is not identified, it will not be addressed in the action plan. There's a need to implement the required activity to manage the gap after prioritization, according to a progressive rational approach using the 5-step strategy proposed by WHO. You know also this slide with the situational analysis, looking for mainly weaknesses in the current situation, but also proceeding to SWOT analysis with strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. You know also this slide with the starting point of situational analysis, and you know all the following now, because you had a presentation about strategic operational planning. You don't have for resource allocation, but Deborah just made the presentation about planning for monitoring evaluation. The first activity to identify the weaknesses mean no conform related to the norm. We have many tools for carrying out a situational analysis. And these tools usually are in the form of question in relation to different situations, which should serve as indicators. And we consider that there is a gap or a weakness each time the answer given make it possible to consider that the situation doesn't comply with the expected standard. You have always to compare the situation on the ground in your country to the norm recommended by WHO or other institution. Compare your situation to the standards. And once again, it is of critical importance that all the gap or weakness are identified in order to be taken into account in the planning process. Management of the gap. The gap are the difference between the existing and the target indicator. The target indicator is the norm. In the tool of minimum requirement, you have 25 norms to be reached. For each norm, for each indicator, you have to compare with the situation on the ground. It is the reason why this assessment should be done conjointly, because we cannot do this assessment alone, because you know the reality, but we have to work together to understand if there is a gap, the deepness of the gap, and what to do to fill the gap. In all cases, it will be always necessary to identify the strategic intervention and necessary activity, to assess their place in the prioritization process, and depending on this place, if it is among the priority of the year, you have to put it on the operational plan and monitoring evaluation plan. You have also to budgetize according to the necessary resources, and for the implementation, use the 5 steps approach. Here are the 5 steps from 1 to 5. I have been talking very widely about these 5 steps, and we will go very concretely to the 5 steps approach using a concrete example just in this presentation. But before going to implementation, you have to prioritize, to more understand the process of prioritization in terms of IPC, because in terms of IPC program, we have some realities in the prioritization. We know already that there is a systematic prioritization to be done. There is no need to use a tool, no need to use a matrix for prioritization. Because we know it is fundamental, it is crucial for each country to have a sufficiently well-trained core team in significant quantity for a management of the IPC program based on proven competence. It's a reality. Without that, you cannot have an effective program. There is a need also to put in place as soon as possible a national strategy for lasting protection on staff against the occupational risk. And we are on epidemic. The epidemic is not over. You have to protect your staff. There are some other reality on prioritization. I'm talking about the component. Component 1, as I said, to ensure in the early stage leadership to secure resources as soon as possible and to allow a smooth running of program. There is a need for institutionalization at a high level at the administrative hierarchy. But because, as you know, with global resolution, something new appears in the context of health system. IPC is a new and important topic of public health and should be elevated at high level in the administrative hierarchy of the health system. It's a recommendation. Our systematic priorities are the component 2 and 3, you know, technical directive and training of people, which will have to implement the activities, will have to run activities, should be capacitated first. There is also partly in component 6, the monitoring evaluation should be done from the beginning, and also for early indicators, hand hygiene should be one of the first process priorities. So to summarize, in the first day, I think it's yesterday, Deborah presented the core IPC, core component of IPC program as a cart with 8 wheels, which are the 8 components. Regarding to Africa, our continent, our countries, we cannot have in the same time all the 8 wheels. It's not possible. So we are targeting the minimum requirement, and we can start with 4 wheels because a car can be run with 4 wheels. Component 1, maximum of component 1, because the component 1s allow leadership, allow resources, allow sustainability. It is the only component 1 for which we can go further minimum requirement. For component 2, 3, and 6, we will target only the minimum. Just some guideline, not all, you cannot have all guideline at the beginning, but basic like standard precaution, transmission-based precaution, and some also for tertiary care. For component 3, we have to training for initial training, postgraduate training, but let's start with personnel in service training, continuous training. We cannot do all in the first years. And for component 6, just to start with having a technical working group for monitoring and evaluation. So we will have 4 wheels, but as you can see, it's a minimum requirement and the wheels are not very strong. To improve the strength of the wheel, put multimodal strategy everywhere to consolidate them. So we can go ahead with 4 wheels. Now, we have also a tool for prioritization. Nevertheless, we are not going to use it now, but after the priority activities, we are going further in the activities and you will have to use this priority matrix, balancing between the importance of the activities and many other factors like political commitment, financial feasibility, availability of human resources, etc. And you will use it choosing priority in the green zone. Now let's go to a concrete example of GAP and his management. So for the identification, you have to answer yes. The answer yes is set only, I don't insist, only when all aspects of the question or all the question group together for the same activity is a positive answer. That means it's a law of all or nothing. Even if the question 90% is positive, you should answer no. It's clear. The answer no to a question leads to identification of a gap to be filled. But just we have exception. The answer yes can exceptionally trigger a strategic intervention depending on the local context. Think always to your local situation. I gave yesterday the example of some focal point. They are well identified, but there is no formal appointment. Sometimes there is an appointment, but the appointment is not confirmed, not complied to the norm. The concrete example is about the absence of framework on implementation of the protection of personnel. It's a systematic priority to implement a national strategy for protection personnel. It's a systematic priority and it's an intervention lacking in most of countries in Africa. The gap identifies is a lack of system for investigating cases of infection or exposure among staff. What are the challenges for this gap? There is a need to identify the necessary resources. There is a need for assessment of the gap according to the available resources. There is a need to develop an appropriate action plan for the establishment of a system for investigation. So all these actions are needed. Different steps for managing a gap. When you are starting, you have finished preparation of activities. The identification occurs at step 2 on the 5-step strategy. The rest of the activities follow the gap process described on the slide 12. This slide 12, you know, it's the cycle of 5 steps. After the step 2, for baseline assessment, go to the step 3. And the step 3 is to develop and implement action plan, operational plan, and monitoring plan with allocation of the necessary resources. And the step 4 is the assessment of the impact of activities, while step 5 will be sustainability of activities over the long term. So you know now very well the 5 steps. List of necessary activity and prioritization. Establishment of national case investigation system require 3 strategic lines of intervention. There is a need to ensure investigation at level of a few pilot sites because we cannot start in all facilities. We have to choose some pilot sites. We need to set up an epidemiological surveillance for collecting data and managing data. And you need, after this pilot phase, to ensure scaling up in all facilities because it should be done for each staff. Investigation should be done for all staff infected or exposure to the infection. And for each strategic intervention, we have several activities and sub-activities. As the protection is considered as a priority, activities should be carried out in the short term. So it should be included in your first operational plan. Illustration. This action, this table should comprise of activities in the step 3 because the action plan is developed in the step 3. You have prepared, you have proceeded to the baseline assessment, you have identified your gap, you know now it's a priority gap to be addressed. Now you are in the step 3 for developing action plan. So in the action plan, we propose first operational plan, actually, because it's a priority. You understand, and you know now what is the operational plan. With this template, you put the intervention. We have for the protection of health workers, we have two intervention strategies, which are first, ensure the investigation at the level of few pilot sites. And the second will be to set up an epidemiological surveillance, because you have your investigation and you have to collect data to set up a system of epidemiological surveillance. The aim is to know what are, for exposure, what are the risks to take action, and for infection, what are the favoring factors to implement preventive measures to avoid infection of health workers. And for each intervention, you have to develop activities in order to ensure the investigation in pilot site. You have to put in place first administrative and organizational measures in facilities. You have to identify pilot sites and appoint investigators, and you have to train the investigators. All are different activities for the same intervention. And you have to do the same for setting up epidemiological surveillance. You have to identify and designate the staff responsible. You have to provide training, and you have to implement. And for implementation, you have to design, to appoint the responsibilities, the time frame, the indicators, the resources, and the source funding. So you can go through implementation of your operational plan. An implementation operational plan should include also the monitoring evaluation of your action plan. So you have to proceed to the monitoring of this intervention. For the first intervention, you have to identify the basic resources. You have to identify what activities to be done for the intervention. What are the output, expected output? What are the outcome? What are outcome at program, outcome in staff, and then the impact is a long-term effect. It is very difficult to start a program and to have impact. As I said, we are building. In the first years, we will expect to have process and some structure and some process indicator. Impact indicator will come later. Nevertheless, the impact indicators are the most important indicators, because we put in place the program in order to have this impact, but you cannot have the impact in the short term. And you have to follow all with a dashboard with timelines, with target indicators, etc. But note that the target indicators, the most important target indicators for this strategic intervention will be to have the reduction of incidence rate in staff infection. I think it's clear now, but you cannot get these target indicators very shortly. After implementing, after having your monitoring action plan, the next is the impact assessment to identify strength, weakness, and level of achievement. It should be done just before the end of the year. And after the step 4, the step 5 will be Listen, learn from the evaluation, and it helps to consolidate the program. After the 5 steps, we've consolidated, demonstrated capacity at pilot facilities. You have to scale up your program to consolidate, to generalize throughout the country, depending on available resources. So it can take time for the scaling up. Thank you very much. I think I am going to pursue with the second presentation before the question. Deborah, what do you think?
Yes, Prof.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share for the last presentation in resource allocation. Okay, can you see my presentation on slide mode?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. This presentation is about resources allocation. It's very important because you don't have a sustainable budget from the state. And as we will see, in the first year, maybe next 2 years, you will be developing and implementing action plan without this budget from the state. So you will be based on partners, and we hope this presentation is very, very important because you are going to work without budget with the partner support. So we are going to see all these different parts. Let's go. First, identification of resource requirement for the implementation of activities. You have to use your operational plan for identification of all different resources to be involved in activities. You have a template for operational plan, and in the template, where is the topic of resources? And in this topic, we have 3 kinds of resources. We have human resources, we have infrastructure and equipment, and we have operational resources. All these different resources should be checked and make available. Let's talk about different resources. Human resources, most important. We cannot do anything without capacitate human resources. What are the human resources? The human resources. Sorry for the French. It is written in French, you see, here. The meaning is human resources. We have 3 kinds of human resources. The staff regularly involved in the implementation of activity program. For this, for the staff, for the state staff, there is no additional cost. Maybe sometimes, but the costs are not high. Sometimes you have to give per diem, you have to give for the transport, etc. But the cost is not very high. In the other hand, we have the consultant. The staff recruit, consultant staff recruit locally or nationally is cheaper. The international recruited consultant staff is more expensive. You have infrastructure, equipment, and technical material. It comprises general infrastructure for meeting, seminar, classroom, etc. You have technical infrastructure, water, electricity, sanitation, etc. Isolation facilities. So you have many things for infrastructure. But you have also equipment for implementation of hygiene processes necessary for hand hygiene, for sterilization, for waste management, for biocleaning, etc. You have also technical material like PPEs, technical material for disinfection, etc. So this topic is very wide, comprised of big material, but also very small material. The third topic in resources is the operational resources. This is essentially represented by financial resources made available to the program for carrying out the activities. Commonly, it is known as a budget. It's a financial aspect, the budget. And for budget, we have two kinds of budget. We have operating budget, generally allocated by the state. It is annually for the implementation of operational plan. And many countries, fortunately, have already moved to program budget in the country based on performance-based funding. So this operating budget is not enough because it is just for implementation of the activities. The program needs also investment budget because, as you know, there is a big chapter with infrastructure, material, and equipment. And in this state, we have investment budget. The IPC program need to be part of the national investment budget for the acquisition of infrastructure, the major equipment, and technical material. The source of different resources. We have first the government, mainly. So it is a need to involve the program in the state budgeting process. It's an annual activity. So in all countries where this activity is annually done, it is led by the finance sector on several stages and through the year for the following year. We are in October. In all countries, the process of budgeting for 2023 is just ending, but it took all the year of 2022. It's a long process to finalize the budget straight. But as I said, it is led by finance sector. And for the IPC program, there are some necessary prerequisites. The political commitment of decision maker at the highest level and the collaboration with financial level. So at national level, the financial services from the Ministry of Health should work closely with IPC program, with all stakeholders, and collaborate with Ministry of Finance for the annual budget allocation. And for that, as we said on the questionnaire, there is a strategy proposed by Resolve that we can use to summarize this strategy. The aim is to have a technical working group comprised with IPC team, financial services, stakeholders, working with all decision center for allocation of budget and giving some document of the importance. There is an advocacy to be done. There is an important advocacy to be done in order to allow the Ministry of Finance to include IPC in the process of budgeting. But this process can take 1 or 2 years after the official creation of the program. So we have to focus first on the operating budget while waiting for a good identification of the need in infrastructure, equipment, and material. The meaning is, for the first years, where the most important is to work on the operating budget. And once we have a norm for care environment, we'll do the same process for allocation on investment budget based on the proof, the importance of care environment. So there is in the action plan where we'll have important activities for advocacy for budget, ever for operating budget and also for investment budget. But the resources also come from technical partners. As you can see, in the first years, you will be based on partners. WHO, primary supporter for IPC. But it is important also to work with partners for resources, in particular in the start of the program. We have also donation, sponsorship, twinnings, very important. South-South or mainly North and South. But for this such funding or research funding, beware of potential influences, especially for sponsorship. Now, the place of resource allocation. Once you have your operational plan and you feel you need to identify all the resources needed, so you can go through details, budget of your operational plan. The consideration to be taken, the strategy for national advocacy, the budgeting for IPC activities should be based on national and institutional policies, following the practices of local markets. So you have to use your habits. The calculation should be transparent. So it is important to have your unit cost of all activities. Align your budget with budget allocation in over department to allow comparison of cost over time. And ensure the link with the operational plan and monitoring evaluation plan. Other important consideration. There is a need for financial and accounting expertise. So for budgeting, we need the collaboration with financial services. They have the capacity for procurement, for costing. We don't have this capacity, but we know what we want. So it's a teamwork. Link the cost to activities. The advocation, we have many documents for advocacy. We have a resolution now. We have global strategy. We have the resolution on global IPC, etc. We have many documents for advocacy. And we have also our own document, the result of the baseline assessment, showing the need for effective IPC program. And as you can see, will have many documents for an effective advocacy. Different steps. It's not really our capacity, but you will have, don't worry, you will have to work with financial services, with have big capacities on different steps of budgeting. Just some suggestion for reducing the finding. You are going to work without regular budget from state. So you have to minimize the cost of activities. What resources are needed for the situational analysis? You should know what resources was developed for this problem. Fortunately, WHO solves this problem. But you should understand that one thing is to have action plan. Another thing is to have resources for implementation. And you have to understand that it will take approximately 2 years for IPC related activities to be mainstream into regular ministry budget. And during this time, you have some suggestion, like include IPC related activity in the job description of existing staff until found are available to hire new staff. Consider training for technical expertise and time for training. I see some, the training is very important because your staff can get expertise, going to the north, seeing, getting capacity. You can also receive some material. For instance, in Senegal, I have seen one hospital receiving a big container full of alcohol-based envelope. It's an important material for hand hygiene, and it will be available in this facility for 1 or 2 years. Always on suggestion. Use existing facilities in ministry to hold workshop. Consider as just a simple meeting, service meetings, and not work, no need to go to the hotel, no need to go, etc. Ask participants to bring their own lunch. It's just for the primary stage to build something, to have official, formal activities. Use a sponsor, but be aware of influence of sponsors, obviously. Organize a meeting on IPC on the sideline of large group meeting already planned. If the all stakeholders are present in some important activity, take the opportunity to gather them for a meeting. Use every public awareness opportunity to get some IPC message out, showcase, etc. And there are many things to minimize the cost of activities. Now we have template also for budget allocation, but it's just a template. You can use your current, you have set, probably you have a template for budgeting. You can use your national tools. Just a template to be filled, but use your financial services for that and work closely with these financial services. Just some reference also. Thank you very much. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Prof. You know, every time you share these presentations, we are learning again and again. There's so much to learn. And I really liked the resource allocation presentation, quite elaborate and exhaustive. So colleagues, I believe that we have all learned a few things on how we can develop our national action plan. So we are closely coming to the end of the session, but before that, we would really love to hear from you colleagues. So we can start with the Mozambique team. Geoffrey, please help us identify someone.
Okay, maybe Mogadui, Fabio, these are colleagues from the provinces. They also have important inputs for this process. Mogadui e Fábio, se tiverem alguma coisa.
Mogadui and Fabio, if you have anything to say, and also Roy, who's from laboratory, if you can give some inputs, that would be welcome. And we have with us Adriana, who is also a partner and has supported us very much. Actually, it's Adriana and Cristóvão, who are from Japiagu. I would like them to say something.
Okay, Adriana.
Adriana. Fábio, Tomás, Gimo, Cristóvão. You can make some comments. You have access to the microphone. The microphone has been unmuted to you. Dr. Lloyd, Elio, could you please contribute? And it is important for us to present our doubts at this period so that when we go to the in-person workshop for the development of a plan, we can understand things easily and we can have everything necessary for that period. You can use the raise hand function. Good morning. I'm Fabio from that province in the central region of the country. In relation to the presentation, I believe that everything was very clear. And in the survey, which was presented before this debate that we have, and we could see the weaknesses which can be presented later on. But in relation to the presentation, for me, everything was very clear. And now we're going to start developing what we need for the development of the strategic plan. Thank you, Fabio. Any other colleague who wants to comment? Hello. Good morning. Once again, I am Felizarda. Yes, doctor, you can have the floor. Thank you for the presentation, which was very enriching. What Mozambique has to say in regards to this, we have to say that the presentation was really good. We were happy, but at the same time, for our country, it is a challenge when it comes to the financial support from the Ministry of Finance. It's true that the budget is given to the Ministry of, and we plan the activity, including the IPC activities, but taking into consideration that we are in a developing country, the IPC budget is very limited, and we survive on partner support. Times were in the past that partners from Jota Piego who have made a revolution in IPC in Mozambique, and we worked correctly. We implemented as adequately the IPC rules in Mozambique, but currently JP Piago is supporting with a percentage in some areas, and we also have WHO who supports us, but the in-depth of IPC, there's a lot which is done, and we're happy that the partners support us. But when it comes to budget from the Ministry of Economy and Finance in Mozambique, was dedicated to support IPC, we still do not have that practice in Mozambique. We only have an activity line in the existing budget in the Ministry of Health, which does not correspond or does not meet the needs for all activities across the country. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those for the information. So maybe we can have Maria Clara also give input regarding the concerns from Mozambique.
Okay, Deborah, I will turn to
okay.
This is a comment toward Mozambique. Então, bom dia.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I perfectly understand all challenges of lack of budget. This is a constant struggle in all developing countries, and this calls for a lot of persistence. And as it has been mentioned today by Prof. Babaka, the issue on budget, it is more to do with the choice of priorities. So this is a suggestion which I think we have thought of that, but this is an important focus in terms of in the choice of priorities, which will vary from country to country. So at the time of allocating such budgets, the choice of priorities is important. And leveraging this opportunity of outbreak situations, because sometimes politically wise, for you to have more allocation of such budgets for IPC, I have also written in the chat I've written something on toolkits. Unfortunately, this is a publication which is still only in English, but this publication is also going to be translated into Portuguese soon, because we know how relevant it is, and it is in the chat. The link for that publication is in the chat, which talks about aspects which has to do with preparedness, readiness concerning IPC, which can also be important for you in the budgeting, and also to be ready for possible outbreaks. That's all I have, Deborah.
Make the same comment in English. I don't know if the translation team have already translated my my comments into English.
Yes.
Please let me know. What do you think?
Yes, it has been done in English.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Maria.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Maria Clara. And indeed, just to emphasize on what Maria Clara has said, the document is quite useful. You know, we used it in this is the IPC framework for preparedness, readiness, and response. Geoffrey, there's a lot of outbreaks like cholera in the setting of Mozambique, and also outbreaks in Zambia, same. We can use this framework, and Maria Clara has been very instrumental in drafting this document, but I believe that, and the rest of the HQ colleagues, I believe this document will be very important for all of us as we look into, or as we support the countries in terms of preparedness, readiness, and response for IPC. So Geoffrey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Deborah. I just wanted to comment in regards to the what we have as an issue on the financial. Doutora Felizarda, é assim, esta é uma oportunidade que nós temos que é para...
Dr. Felizarda, this is an opportunity for us, together with colleagues from different sectors, to make planning of activities for the year, but also for a strategic planning for the coming 5 years, and see through them, the Ministry of Finance, we can have the guidance as to how we can have this funding. And the other aspect, which is also important, is how the IPC program can have more autonomy in terms of the management, integrating all activities in the other areas. For me, this is an opportunity. It's true that this does not happen, but it's an opportunity that through these tools, which we are well known by our ministers, and we have everything that would be an instrument to support in our rationale when we request a government contribution in terms of the annual budgets. We will see what happens if we have any difficulties. We're going to ask them to assist us until we have the budget that we actually need, because it is important that this becomes sustainable. We partners have a plan to support you, but I think that the health facilities need to have more support, which comes in a more consistent and permanent manner, because they know that every year they have a fixed amount according to their activities, and nationwide we can help, and also through this the support of the activities that we have in the subunits or in this. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for that. So we can just have some comments from Zambia as well. Precious. Precious, can we get a few people from Zambia to comment? So I think Precious might be having problems unmuting, but colleagues from Zambia, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. We would love to hear something. Okay, so it appears like they are rather quiet today, but feel free to, yes.
Hello.
Hello, Christine, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor's presentation. I'm from Zambia, based in the Belt. I've really seen the stages of the analysis situation, and I see it being some long process, but of quality and importance. That if we had to put it in, we implement it, I would see our IPC program in Zambia being improved, and also with the issues of support in terms of technical support and also financial support. I see ourselves improving the IPC situation in our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for those wonderful remarks. So I think we have learned a lot, and without further ado, I would like to Maria Clara, maybe you can also really emphasize on the IPC framework for readiness and preparedness.
For sure. So once there is a translation, I will move again to Portuguese. Okay, Deborah? So is that possible that I very quickly share my screen just to show 2 slides?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, so very quickly, let me, and then if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so now I'm moving to Portuguese, okay, for the translators.
So this document on preparedness, readiness and response, whose link I have sent to you on the chat, it makes this approach, as I have said previously, organized in 3 stages. The first stage is preparedness, in which we imagine that very often we still do not know that an outbreak is going to come, but the preparedness has to be done, has to exist in terms of IPC, infection prevention control. And this preparedness is not more than the routine activities which have been mentioned here, the essential components, and all this concern we know we have to go step by step in order to attain the essential components, from having as a goal the minimum components in the minimum requirements. And yesterday it has been very well said by one of my female colleague, I forgot her name, the importance of wash in terms of sanitation and water as preparedness elements. Well, within these elements, all these elements of preparedness, readiness, and response, this document is also organized in 3 priorities: those which are more immediate and those which are more earlier, and then the advanced. This is a didactic organization only for people to understand how the process goes. And as in the preparedness stage, we all imagine that this is very before the outbreak happens. But because outbreaks happens every time, as you all know, the difference is that it's changed the trend, and sometimes we have COVID, and then cholera, and then monkeypox, and each and every time we have a situation. And we have the second stage, which is that of readiness, which is also organized. The approach is organized and is for us to be ready to respond to outbreaks. This readiness stage is when the outbreak does not happen in the country or in the region, but is already happening in neighboring countries or in neighboring districts, and we all need to be ready. So this document has got a lot of actions which involve such stage. And finally, we have the response stage phase, which is also organized in this way. We have this materials which is already published on a WHO webpage in the link which I mentioned to you. And we know in each outbreak which happens, we learn and we develop new expertise in terms of IPC, new capacities are installed in terms of IPC, and that is very important by the international sanitary regulation. That's the reason why we put in this image the importance of feedback and continuous improvement, because that is really part when we know of a new outbreak, we learn new capacities. And I would like to reinforce that when the outbreak happens, although unfortunately it's a big harm to health and very often economic damage to the countries, that has been an opportunity for the advance of programs in the country. So the history has proven that the outbreaks direct, or it's a moment that strategically we can have a budget allocation, and this is a time for us to tap into the situation for us to improve and prevent future outbreaks. This is what I would like to say, and I wouldn't like to take a lot of time because this has not previously planned for me to make this presentation, but I'm ready and open to help if you have any doubts, any issues. And as we have more materials, because we're preparing a package to give support, we will be able to share all that with you. And for all that, I remain open and available to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. If you need anything else, I am available. Over.
Thank you so much, Maria Clara, for creating time to join us, for supporting our colleagues here, and also for that brilliant document, which even myself I have found quite influential and also quite critical as we support countries in the various outbreaks. So really recommending that, colleagues, we try and use that, because I believe you'll find it very useful. So I see Francisco's hand is up. Francisco? Francisco Mahamudo? Okay, so perhaps a problem unmuting. So we have come to the close of the meeting, and without further ado, let me call Mr. Dai Makamure to give next steps and as well as closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deborah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the colleagues for joining us from yesterday. I think we have had very fruitful discussions. I appreciate you taking your time to participate in these sessions. And I hope now we have a good understanding on what is infection prevention control. We understand how it is cross-cutting and why we need to strengthen the programs at national level. And also we now have a clear understanding on what the recommendations are in terms of what are the core components for IPC, the minimum requirements of IPC at both national and facility level, and also how we conduct a situational analysis, develop a strategic, operational, and M&E plan, and lastly, how we can mobilize resources so that we effectively support the implementation of our infection prevention programs. So I hope we have all had a good understanding of all the theory that we have had, and we are now going to use all that we have learned in our face-to-face workshop. And as you can see on the screen here, we talked about the different steps of this project that we go through to develop a national action plan. And as you can see, we are now done with the first, second, third, and fourth.
I don't know if it's from my side only, but we are losing you, Tendai.
Action
we can't
plans
hear
for
anything
Zambia
from
and
Tendai.
Mozambique. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we lost you a bit. I think we lost you when you were talking about we are now at the fourth. Yeah, phase.
Okay, sorry about that. I think it's my network. So we have passed the fourth phase, the training process. Now we are moving on to the next step, which will be the fifth step, the face-to-face workshop, where we are going to use all the theory we have learned in the last 2 days to develop the strategic plan, operational plan, and M&D plan for Zambia and Mozambique. So without further ado, I want to conclude this session and say thank you all for taking time and for the commitment and for sitting through. We hope to see you in the face-to-face workshop when we come to Zambia and Mozambique. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Deborah. I hope I was audible.
Yes, you are. So thank you, colleagues. We will share all the presentations and all the video, the recorded version of this, so that you can share with colleagues, even as we start thinking about now embarking on developing the strategic, operational and M&E plan. So thank you, colleagues. Let's meet in the countries. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.